Chutes and Ladders, greatest WWE foreign heels of all time. Hey everyone, my name is Jason.
I'm Desiree Josen.
Today's episode, we're actually going to focus on best foreign heels of all time. Obviously, Gunther holds that spot right now in WWE. This seems to be an evergreen concept, whether it's the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and even today. History repeats itself. We're going to uncover why foreign heels kind of irk us so much, and we're going to go through that countdown together. We have a top 5 list. Des and I have not seen each other's list. I'm sure we're going to surprise each other. And if you think about it from a conceptual standpoint, think about it like this. Obviously, WWE is an American company. It's very easy to draw heat by making fun of America, especially if you're a foreigner. So what, like, actually, Des, I mean, kind of chime in. What do you like?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this overall concept?
I love this. I love heels. I've always been a fan of heels. If I was a wrestler, I would be one. But foreign heels really, really trigger fans. And this is, like you said, it's evergreen. This is throughout time. Anyone, I hate to say this, that doesn't belong or who is an outsider, we initially have that. We don't know who you are. We don't know what you want. So we kind of have that hatred already for you. And especially if you're coming after us patriotic Americans and you blatantly say you don't like us, we're not going to like you. So it's fun. We know that this isn't real. But that's the fun of it. The fun of the character is to feed in. And that's exactly what they want. They want to be hated. They want the booze.
Yeah.
So.
And absolutely, we've said this many times in wrestling. You either should be really, really loved or really, really hated. If you're in between, you're not doing your job.
Right.
So, yeah, absolutely. All right, let's run through this countdown. Okay, so we haven't seen each other's list, so this is going to be fun.
This is so exciting.
I know. Who's your number 5?
Okay, my number 5 is very. It may be controversial just because he wasn't really a long-term heel, and it was pretty obvious, but it was just because of his impact for being a heel, and that is Andre the Giant.
Nice.
He hails from France, and he was a face for about 15 years, and then he turned heel for the better of the company for WWE. If people don't know that, he had the infamous heel turn at Piper's Pit for Mania 1987. Where he, wanted to go against Hogan, and we know how that went with the body slam hurt and the leg drop, and that really umped Mania because WrestleMania 2 was kind of a flop, so that really saved the company. And then, Andre is just a monster, and he is a very famous figure for wrestling. So even though he's very loved, he was hated at that time.
Absolutely. Well, and just to kind of double down on that, what makes that really cool, just to kind of further what you said, in WrestleMania 3, he's obviously the foreign heel going against the most patriotic wrestler of all time, Hulk Hogan. So I kind of added an extra layer. I think this is an excellent choice at number 5.
What's yours?
My number 5 is going to be Yokozuna. And
on my list.
Okay, for sure. Okay, this is awesome. By the way, Andre the Giant is on my list, just ranked a little bit higher. So okay, so this is actually, we have these two in common. But Yokozuna, and the reason why I say that is, look, he comes from this bloodline, which is, a lot of people didn't realize that. They have him Japanese. He's obviously not Japanese, but he has the figure. So they went with it, and they, to be honest, they kind of played on our ignorance as fans a little bit. Most people, I think, a lot of people didn't know that he was Japanese, but he was Pacific. But he was Pacific Islander, so why not? And to double down on that, he was paired with Master Fuji, which I thought was brilliant, to pair them together and draw that extra heat. And listen, Kevin Nash said something very, very profound. You make more money when a heel is a champion and the babyface chases the heel. And Yokozuna made a lot of money.
100%.
All right, let's go to the next one. Number 4. Who you got?
Okay. Roddy Piper.
Really? Okay, this is good. Okay, I love it. Okay. I was going to bring him in honorable mentions, but go for it.
I love him as a heel. He is Canadian. He is from Saskatchewan, but he feeds into his Scottish roots. He is just a maniac and unhinged. And what I loved about him is his mic skills, his promos, but he could back it up in the ring and just put you in a sleeper and knock you out. He was just infamous for that Piper's Pit, how he slammed that coconut on Jimmy Snuka's head. Yep. He was just a shit talker. And he had feuds with everybody. And like NWO, Hogan, you name it.
I want to add another one. When he was in Mexico, he said, "Hey, I want to play the Mexican."
The cucaracha?
Yes! Yes! So here's the thing, and the reason I bring that up is this isn't just an American evergreen concept. This is international. I was going to bring him up in honorable mentions, but I'm going to go ahead and bring this now because it actually kind of ties together. Eddie Guerrero was born in El Paso, Texas. Yep. He would wrestle in Mexico and bring out an American flag. So that drew, and I saw this in a shoot interview, and they said, "Did this draw heat?" He said, "Absolutely." They would throw bags of urine and like, it was bad. Yeah. So because he was just a very proud quote unquote American, but now in Mexico, and that went over really well. So again, this is an evergreen concept internationally.
Speaking of the Guerreros, Roddy even had a feud back in the 70s with Chavo Guerrero Sr. So,
nice. Wow. So this all ties together. That's amazing.
What's your number 4?
My number 4, and I this is the one I was like, I wonder if I'm sure this is gonna blow your mind. The Great Muta.
Yes. He was on my list when I was baking it.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I thought this was gonna be a surprise. The reason, I think this is amazing, and the reason why is because this was older WCW. WCW is a promotion of the South. But he was a great heel for a very long time, and he drew so much heat. And to be honest, he was one of the few international stars that the early 90s WCW had. And of course, with The Miz and everything else, The Miz is still used with Japanese wrestlers to this day. And I think a lot of that has to do with the Great Muta. And I just thought he was just a phenomenal heel.
I love that you put him on his list.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And to all our listeners, promise you, we specifically said, let's surprise each other. So this is amazing.
We agreed and said no. And look at us.
So let's roll on the next one. Who's your number 3?
Yokozuna.
There we go. Okay. Awesome. Anything you want to add that I didn't say?
He was just a monster heel. And I just loved the bonsai drop. He was so hated, and he used his body and force. And I really love that match that he had, the Mania match with Brett. And then the whole, thing with Hulk really kind of ruined his character and his heel run. But even though he was, he wasn't with the WWE very long, only for a few years, but he made such an impact in the 90s as a heel.
Sure. Speaking of heels in the 90s, and a guy you just mentioned, I am going Bret the Hitman Hart as my number 3. That's your number 2. That's funny. Okay, awesome. Okay, and here's the thing. And if you watch his documentary, I think it was called Shadows of Wrestling with Bret Hart. He actually says this. He said, look, I've always wanted to be a face. I always thought it'd be fun. This is obviously interesting. He's Canadian. American Canadian culture are very similar in a lot of different ways. So having a Canadian be this heel and where he was basically a face in Canada, but a heel in the US, this was a new concept, but it worked brilliantly. And the Hart Foundation obviously feuded with Stone Cold and then Shawn Michaels and Triple H. I thought this was executed, no pun intended, but executed perfectly.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's hear your number 2. And
Well, glad you asked. Number two is Bret Hart, Canada's sweetheart.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a huge fan of Bret Hart. He is in my top 5 wrestlers of all time. I've had the honor and privilege of meeting him just a few years ago. But I think he makes such a great heel, even though he makes such a great face. His execution behind the slow transition to a heel was beautiful.
I thought so too.
Yeah, and then it started really with the beginning of the Attitude Era with Stone Cold and that feud there that then went into the Shawn Michaels Montreal screw job. But it was just the promos that he cut as a heel. He was so good at storytelling, and he cut like a 20-30 minute promo after Mania blaming Americans because we were terrible fans and we would put criminals on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And then that's when he reunited with the Hart Foundation and then added Brian Pillman, and it was just a mess. And then he feuded in WCW with the NWO. I just felt like he really excelled and propelled himself as not only a great in-ring star, but now his character is just so good.
Absolutely. And look, any great wrestler, you have to be a great face and a heel, and he was both. And I thought this was his time to shine as a heel, and it worked. So yeah, 100%. I'm actually agreeing. Full agreement with you. And wow, it looks like we have a lot more in common on this list than possible. Because number 2, mine is Andre the Giant, and everything you just said. And here's the thing, especially specifically about WrestleMania 3, where it had to work, and that kind of set the tone, set the precedent till this day. There's the famous stare down between Andre and Hulk. We still talk about it to this day. I still think that adding that extra layer of, hey, he's a heel going after the ultimate babyface who was super patriotic, just added that extra layer, and it is now etched in history.
Yep. Well said.
All right. I have an eerie feeling we had the same number 1, but who's your number 1?
I think he is the greatest foreign heel ever. He is part of one of my favorite heel turns ever. The Iron Sheik.
That's my number 1. That's funny. True story. Wow. That is
I'm going to put you in a camel clutch. I love him. Yeah. He is so good. Yeah. I mean, hello, he did the boot camp matches with Sergeant Slaughter. He just played into his character. He's from Iran, and it was during the hostage crisis.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to mention. Yeah. So
it was all political.
Yeah, it really struck a nerve in most people, specifically at that time.
Yeah,
it was a unique storyline and angle. Obviously, you never want to make fun of any type of situation, something as delicate as that. But again, they really pressed into it. It worked. And fast forward 20 years later, he was going to be my honorable mentions, even though he's not technically foreign. But he was the manager for Sergeant Slaughter during that early 90s feud with Hogan. And so, listen, again, Iron Sheik, this is the reason why I put him number 1, because I would say when I think of like foreign heels that really strikes a nerve in people, I think this is by far takes it to the top.
It was very personal. And he struck a nerve in the 80s and the 90s, because when Sergeant Slaughter turned heel as the Iraqi sympathist, I just remember them coming out with the flags, and they would spit. And it was and I just remember Iron Sheik's promos with Nikolai. He would spit, and then he would flex and say, "Look at my muscles," and you're like, "I hate this bastard."
Right.
But it was just, he was so good. And one thing too is it was sort of a real thing, because when I met Sergeant Slaughter, that's one thing he brought up was the Iron Sheik brought so much heat that he had to actually have police involved to protect his family during this program of him being a heel.
Yeah.
So that tells you how intense this was.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we're not really trying to strike extra nerves, but yeah, this is all part of the storyline. It is what I mean. This is what wrestling is. It's about good versus evil, and they kind of portrayed that.
Yeah.
So wow, that is funny. We actually had a lot more in common on this lesson than
I
we both
know.
anticipated, which is great.
How much fun is that?
Absolutely. All right. Any honorable mentions that you have?
Okay, I have 2.5. I did my honorable mention for foreign manager heel was Mr. Fuji
There you go.
because I mean he was just a menace and would blow the salt in the eyes of the opponents, and he would sell the contracts of the tag teams that he was involved with. Like he dropped Demolition and then went to what was it, Powers of Pain, and then went back. He was just a mess, but I loved him. He was a bad boy. And then my other honorable mention is Haku.
There you go. Okay.
I he was scary, but also too he was scary in real life because there are multiple shoot interviews with people saying that he is like the scariest man alive. You do not want to mess with this man. And when I met him in person, he was so gentle, very sweet. And when I said, "Sir, will you choke me?" It was the craziest thing because he was like, "Stand up and I'll choke you." And then my 0.5, I don't know. You mentioned him earlier, and I was very hesitant to put him on the list because I was like, technically, he was born in Texas, but he was part of a LWO. Eddie Guerrero.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I actually mentioned my honorable mentions like throughout their countdown because it tied in so well. I'm gonna add one more. Muhammad Hassan in real life, he's actually Sean Capone. He in real life, he's actually Italian from New Jersey. They had his storyline to be a Muslim American that was from Detroit. Apparently, he was going to win the title, but there was in real life terrorist attacks in London, so they had to scrap that particular SmackDown, which is already taped and too late to edit. They had to scrap it in London. And then by that time, America had to, I specifically remember the episode, they had specifically over and over said, basically giving warnings to the fans, like over and over throughout the telecast. It was an absolute disaster, and they basically had to squash him altogether, which it was sad because, again, as a young, an up and coming superstar, you tell him what to do, he's going to do it full force, and then they kind of screwed him over in that process. So heart goes out to him. I know he was wrestling in Indies after that, but yeah, in real life, he's actually Italian American from Jersey. But yeah, it was kind of sad. But yeah, that really struck a nerve because they really played that angle because of what happened in 9/11, and the whole thing was, yeah, it was definitely in bad taste. But again, that's why I put him in honorable mention because he never really actually took off.
Yeah.
Right now, and then so to kind of as we wrap up, we obviously have Gunther taking that top spot now. Where would you rank him? How long do you see this? That like him really striking the nerves of American fans, and do you see him ever turning face?
I like Gunther as a heel.
Yeah.
I think he is so hateable and unlikable, and he plays it so well, but everyone loves him as this. I think he can carry this on for a good amount of time. I don't necessarily see him going on full face, maybe, but I would say, maybe a slight turn of a heel. I actually potentially see him, fingers crossed, maybe getting, I don't know, like a big, I don't even know what to, like a bigger person to come in Mania.
Yeah.
Like a Brock Lesnar to come back and get him.
Yeah,
something like that.
For sure. Well, and also one thing I wanted to add, because, and I, you can also, I'll throw him in also as an honorable mention, because, CJ Perry we went to school with, but Rusev, yeah. I'll throw in Rusev, and even CJ, because, they kind of struck that nerve too, obviously, but when Rusev started off as a heel, he eventually turned face, but it's a similar concept. Back in the day when wrestling were, they did territories. You would have a heel, specifically a foreign heel, and they'd go from one territory until finally the babyface would beat him up. But then he would actually go to another territory and do the same thing, and another territory, and so on and so forth. obviously can't really do that anymore. So once this run is done, then you generally see if you can switch him over to face. I think Gunther will turn face eventually. I don't. Again, we're in a different era, but as far I think he's a great. I love him too. I think he's a great in-ring worker. For now, draw that heat and see how far we can take it. That's what I think.
Hell yeah.
All right, that wraps up this episode. What did you think? Who are your top foreign heels of all time? Do you agree or disagree with us? Please DM us at the Shoots and Ladders. And also, please like, share, and subscribe both on YouTube and Spotify. Once again, my name is Jason.
I'm Desiree Josen.
All right, until next time, have an awesome day.
Bye, friends.